Hi guys, today's topic we're going to cover nutrition. And although nutrition is such a massive topic and we could probably spend several weeks focusing on different aspects, what we're looking to do is to sort of talk about the foundations. Um, a lot of the time when people think about nutrition, they try and get too sort of fancy with it and start focusing on all different kinds of supplements and all that sort of stuff. We're going to try and keep it as simple and basic to start with. We'll cover all of the more advanced topics and things like that as the weeks and months go by in later webinars, as will we with the mindset stuff. So these first few weeks, these first few webinars are really about getting the basics right, and then we can look into more detail as the weeks and months go by. So, first thing, a lot of you have possibly already been through some of this information, but it won't harm to go through it again so that you've got everything covered. You know, it really is important that you have everything covered here, and then once you've got those things covered, then you're ready for the more advanced stuff. And to be honest with you, from speaking to a lot of the members, I know that there's still areas within what we're covering today that will definitely help you get better results. So we're going to start off then. So first thing that I always ask anyone to do is to trust in the system that I'm presenting to you, because it works. You know, there's been countless number of people that have been through the program, and when they follow it, it works. Most of you will be able to, well, I think all of you will be able to recognize that, because when you did it for the first 6 weeks, when you first started, when you was really focused on the nutrition and you followed the system, it worked. The reason why some people won't have kept the results that they wanted to is because they came away from the system. And none of this is unrealistic. You know, it's all completely realistic. We're not asking you to do anything here that shouldn't be a natural part of your diet. So obviously we'll get to work on those now. The second thing that we're going to ask you to do is to be accountable for your own results, and that's really important. You know, don't play the blame game. Don't sort of focus on what other people are achieving. Focus on yourself. Set smart, realistic goals, and then we'll try to follow that. And don't think that you're not going to hit plateaus. There's still going to be periods where you're going to plateau, and we'll need to change things up, and that's completely fine. But if we've not been following the basics to start with, it's not going to work. And then the final thing that I want to sort of state is that you've got to have a plan in place. And you've got to plan ahead. So what I would recommend that you do is that you spend at least 1 hour once a week, maybe on a Sunday, where you sit down and you plan out your week ahead. You get all your meals sort of prepped and ready, or you at least know what you're having on each day. You get your shopping list ready, you get it all mapped out so you know what days you're going to get the shopping on, and then you take it from there. And don't expect things to go perfectly. You might put a meal down on say a Monday evening, and it's just not possible to do. Maybe you've not thought about the time side of things, and you think actually this isn't going to work, or it doesn't work for a few weeks. What you've got to do is recognize what's not working, and then make the changes based on your plan and the preparation that you've put in. We're just going to, in fact, let me just quickly fly over the 4 pillars to success. So they are exercise. Obviously, everyone knows that in order to achieve the best results, you've got to be working out, you've got to be doing exercise, which we've covered that, we know that, we're doing that in the classes. The nutrition, obviously, is what we're going to cover today. We'll have a little look at lifestyle things as well at the end of this, but again, we'll probably devote a specific webinar to that. And mindset, which is something we covered last webinar, but again, we'll be covering that in more detail in future weeks. So, the triad of health, it states that in order for any goal to be accomplished, whether it's a health goal, a fitness goal, a weight loss goal, a body transformation goal, you have to address all three sides of the triangle. So, the chemical relates to your food intake, it relates to stress levels, it relates to lifestyle balance, so the chemical side of things has to be considered and controlled. The mental emotional side of things. So there's a mental emotional side to any goal, and again, that's something that has to be worked on. If you have a poor psychology, a poor mindset, and you don't believe that you can achieve it, that's obviously going to hinder your success. And then the structural or the physical, which is obviously the exercise component, which, as I said, has to be a part of any plan. So, as we can see, we're trying to address all three sides of the triangle with our approach. We're going to jump ahead here because we've covered the goal setting side of things last week, so we won't need to worry too much about that. Just quickly to mention about habits, obviously your habits need to support the goals that you've put down. If so, from a nutritional point of view, it's really important that you've got the kitchen prepared and that it helps you to break unhealthy or bad habits. So, for example, if you've got a treat drawer or cupboard or something, then obviously we need to think about that and say, right, okay, how are we going to make sure that that doesn't become a temptation at some stage or some point? Um, so things that you should throw away would be sweets, bad starches, pasta, bread, cereal, soft drinks, pops, juice, highly processed dips and dressings, um, fatty dairy products like sour cream, certain milk products, frozen desserts, sugary and oily sauces, and processed foods. What you should add, ideally, as much fresh food as possible. Obviously, budget becomes an issue, but as much fresh food as possible: meat, poultry, fish, chicken, lean beef, um, healthy sources of dairy, eggs, um, vegetables, fruit, um, water, green tea, herbal teas. Those sorts of things are obviously what we want to make up the major portion of our food intake. If you've got kids, obviously you're going to have to probably keep certain snacks. But if I'm honest, I would probably advise that as much as possible you make healthy snacks. You can make muffins, gluten-free muffins. You can make loads of beetroot brownies. There's loads of different options out there. And as I say, if you need recipes for different treat ideas that you can have with the kids, then obviously feel free to get back to me. Um, yeah, so we've said about what do we throw away? Okay, so first thing, before we get too deep into my sort of plan, I'll just briefly explain what I've based this sort of system on. I don't know if many of you have heard of metabolic typing, but I really like metabolic typing, the approach that it lays out. And what metabolic typing talks about is that there's no one size fits all when it comes to nutrition. We're all slightly different. We've all got a slightly different body chemistry, and what works for one person won't work for another. And in their research, they travelled around the globe and they looked at different societies. They looked at different groups, pockets of people that hadn't been westernized, that hadn't sort of changed from their staple sort of diet. And what they found was the people that had been stuck to their traditional way of eating, their traditional foods, were generally obviously much healthier than those that had changed and moved to a more processed diet. But more importantly, what they identified was, say, for example, when they studied one group that was perhaps maybe more plant-based eaters and that they didn't eat a massive amount of animal produce and were, say, more of a vegetarian or a carb type person, that these people had really good health tremendous health, and they benefited from the foods that they naturally had around them. So they sort of maybe came to the conclusion, right, perhaps maybe this is the perfect diet, this is the diet that we should all be eating. But when they observed and studied another group that had the complete opposite diet, but that was within their natural environment, say for example, a group that were living in a much colder climate where it was much more animal based produce, and they were eating very little in the way of maybe vegetables, plant based foods, their health was also extremely good. And so they came to the conclusion that, as I say, there's no one size fits all. As a general rule, one way that it sort of works is if your body evolved and your physiology evolved in a really cold climate, you would probably be more of a protein type person. You'd probably be able to tolerate much more in the way of healthy fats and higher protein diet. Whereas if you was more of a plant-based eater or carb type, you might be more you might have evolved more in a warmer climate where plant-based life would have thrived and been more readily available. So that's one way of thinking about it. There's also lots of other factors that affect your metabolic type, such as the amount of exercise that you do and the stress levels. There's so many other factors, but that's one way of thinking about it. And what I would recommend that everyone starts doing is they start with recording a food diary. So if you write down all the foods that you eat throughout the day, and what I want you to do is not only record down what you're eating and when you're eating it, including liquids, but also record down how you're feeling throughout the day. So, do you feel bloated? Do you feel tired? How's your energy levels? How's your mood, your concentration? All of those things we want to record down on a daily basis so that we can monitor them, and we can sort of look at it and say, right, okay, let's have a look at your food diary. Oh, that day you found that you was having real energy swings. You know, your energy was up and down, and we can look at what you was eating, and then we can also sort of identify maybe you're eating the wrong food types for your metabolic type. So, filling out a food diary and writing out how you feel based on that day's food is also a really good way of working this out. Um, what I want to do next is just talk about um, the balance between your macronutrients. So macronutrients are carbohydrate, proteins, and fats. They're the main sort of bulk of our calories. Most of our calories come from carbohydrate, proteins, and fats. Then we've got what's known as our micronutrients, which is the vitamins and minerals and secondary nutrients that we get. But the bulk of our calories comes from carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So what we need to do is make sure that we're having a good amount of each of them. I don't believe that we shouldn't be having that we should cut out any food group. We need all of them in our diet, but some of us will need more than others. So what I want us to do, and again, this might sound a little bit contradictory to what I've just been saying about everyone's body chemistry is different, but what I'd like us to all do is maybe start off on the same sort of level. So what we're going to say is that every meal, that's breakfast, lunch, dinner, and all of your snacks, we're going to try and follow a fairly balanced breakdown. So what we're going to say is that you should, at every meal and every snack, 40% of your meal should be protein source. Then another 40% should be carbohydrate based, and then sort of 15 to 20% should be healthy fats. So that's what we're looking for, is that breakdown with each meal and each snack. Okay, and that's really important. And we're going to further divide. So we're going to talk about what are good sources of protein, what are good sources of carbohydrate, and good sources of fats in just a second. But when we talk about carbohydrates, we're going to divide them into two different categories. So we're going to talk about them in terms of starches and non-starches. So you've got starchy carbohydrates would be things like rice, um, potatoes, bread, that sort of thing. Non-starchy carbohydrates would be more in the form of uh, so your non-starchy carbohydrates would be more in the form of vegetables, non-root vegetables, things like tomatoes, celery, cucumber, broccoli, all those sorts of things. And generally, there's a few different ways we could do it. So what we could say is, out of that 40% of carbohydrate, what we're going to do is have it as a 20-20 split. So 20% of it should be starchy carbohydrates, 20% of it should be non-starchy. Um, or we could do it based on servings. So as you can see here, what we've done is we've said carbohydrates relating to starches or vegetables on the screen there relating to non-starchy carbohydrates. So for a woman, we're allowing two to four servings of lean protein, 2 to 3 servings of carbohydrates. As I say, we're going to talk about these in more detail in a second, but just so that we realise how it breaks down, 4 to 6 servings of vegetables, 2 to 3 servings of healthy fats. That's per day. And for men there, it's slightly different, so you can see how it breaks down there. In tier two is for those clients that want to sort of be a little bit stricter and see probably a little bit better in terms of results. They're willing to sort of really step up and commit to the program a little bit more. So what we're doing is, again, that 3 to 4 servings of protein for women, half to 1 serving of carbohydrate. So what we might say is that though you still have carbohydrate in the form of vegetables at each meal, you might only allow one meal where you have a serving of carbohydrate, the starches. Um, so I hope that sort of makes sense. Um, and or the other way of doing it is, you could say that on a training day, you're going to allow maybe your breakfast and your lunch, you're going to allow a starchy form of carbohydrate or a starchy serving of carbohydrate at each of those meals. But on your third meal, you're not going to have any starchy carbs. And then on a non-training day, maybe you're just going to have one meal where you allow starchy carbs. So this is tier 2, where we're getting a little bit stricter so that we can sort of control the amount of sugar coming into our system. Okay. So again, if that doesn't make sense, feel free to contact me and I can talk you through that in more detail. So let's just have a bit of a chat about carbohydrates and the breakdown of them. Just before we do that, again, we've sort of broken it down here into serving sizes. So as you can see, to make it simple so that people don't have to mess around with scales and things like that, we've got a serving size equals the following. So 1 serving of protein is the palm of your hand. A serving of carbohydrate is a cupped handful. A serving of vegetables is a clenched fist. A serving of fat is a thumb size or a teaspoon or a tablespoon if it's liquid form. Okay, and there's a link there that you can use to sort of have a look at a little visual of how that sort of looks. It's absolutely fine to measure if you want to. That would be fine to do that as well, and then we can sort of be even more accurate if you want to measure how much a cupped handful actually equals, and then we can cut back from that or build up if we have to, based on your results. So protein. So as everyone knows, protein is vital. It's what we need to build the primary sort of components. They're the building blocks of all the cells of the body. So protein is really essential. We have to have it in our diet. Probably the biggest problem with protein is the quality of it. It's getting a really good quality source of protein, which is the most important thing. And these days that can be quite tricky because of how animals are looked after and how they're produced. It obviously affects the quality of the nutrients. So the biggest thing I would always advise that we always look to do, whether it's protein, carbohydrates, is to look to ideally buy organic if possible. But as I say, we'll talk more about those things later on. But if possible, try and get the highest quality source of food that we can afford. And when we're talking about protein, ideally we want to be looking at avoiding things that are heavily processed, so luncheon meats, any processed meats, those sorts of things are the ones we want to avoid, such as bacon can be heavily processed, ham, as I say, your luncheon meats, those sorts of things. Too much tin stuff can be quite heavily processed with different additives or preservatives and things as well. So if we can avoid them, that would be best. Good sources of protein, as you can see there, lean ground beef, chicken, turkey, eggs, fish, salmon, pork, bison, cottage cheese. Now, obviously, protein of the main sources of proteins I've mentioned there have been animal based. Of course, you can get plant based proteins as well, in the form of nuts, seeds. Almonds are a really good source of protein. So, nuts, seeds, beans, pulses, legumes, you've got lots of different options. So, obviously, if you are more vegan, vegetarian, prefer more of a plant-based diet, then you can still get the protein. But what you have to do is have a much more varied selection of those ingredients to make sure that you're getting all of the essential amino acids. If you need more information on that, again, feel free to get in contact. Carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates are probably the most out of control of most people's diet. It's not the fat that they're taking on board, it's the carbohydrates that they need to get more control over. So, as we've already talked about, carbohydrates broken up into starches and non-starches, and we need to have a good understanding of the difference between the two and how we're going to split them per meal or throughout the day. And then the other thing that we need to consider with carbohydrates is the GI factor of the carbohydrate. So if something is really high GI carbohydrate, it's going to break down in the system very quickly, very rapidly, and if we're not able to use all of that energy, all of that sugar instantly, the body's got to make use of it some other way and it will try to store it, but it can't store much in the form of carbohydrate or sugar. But what it can do is it can store abundant amounts of fat. So what the body will naturally do is it will say, right, okay, I've taken all this energy on board. I don't need it all now because I'm not particularly active, and so therefore it will say, right, we'll store this for later usage. And then generally what happens is it's converted to another energy form in the form of fat, because as I say, it can store abundant amounts of that, and that is stored and used and stored for later usage, which most people don't obviously use, and that's why their weight loss is out of control. Weight gain is out of control. So we need to have a really good understanding of carbohydrates and what's high GI, what's low GI. What you can do is just go onto the internet, type in GI index, print it out, put it on your fridge, and then just keep monitoring it and having a look at it. Um, Generally, most fruits, well, quite a lot of fruits can be quite high GI. So as you can see, fruit we need to be a little bit careful of, a little bit cautious with. I'm not saying don't have fruit, but just be careful maybe when you're eating it. So if you're having it after a workout, then great. But if you're having, say, watermelon for breakfast, it's quite high in sugar, it's high GI, and it's going to cause our energy levels to sort of peak and then drop, and we'll feel tired and sluggish very, very quickly afterwards. So try to monitor and moderate how much fruit we're having. In terms of processed carbohydrates like white rice, white potato, white bread, those sorts of things, I would personally say avoid them altogether. They need to be taken out because again they cause the blood sugars to really rise and plummet plummet very quickly, and our energy's up and down, and our fat storage will be mayhem with that strategy. So if we can try to stick to more wholesome food, sweet potato, rice, a wholemeal rice, they're still fairly moderate GI, those types. But the lower GI would be things like vegetables, broccoli, spinach, kale, as I say, sweet potato would be better than white potato, quinoa. Those sorts of options would be far better for most people for that sustained level of energy. Um, yeah, we've got the vegetable sources there, so as you can see, have a look through that and see what you think. All of this is in the nutrition packs that we send out to you, so obviously you can refer back to this information in those nutrition plans as well. Fat. So fat is the most misunderstood of all of the macronutrients. Most people, and we've been brainwashed into thinking that we need to reduce fat and we need to take fat out of our diet. Trans fats and the processed fats, obviously, yes, they're unhealthy. We don't want them in our diet. But natural fats are all totally fine. And again, we can get plant-based fats and we can get animal-based fats. So it's important that we get a selection of the two. And obviously, when we're consuming animal-based fats, we need to be consuming a high-quality source because a lot of the toxins can be stored within the fat of the animal. So try to avoid it if possible. So really good sources of fat: coconut oil, nut butters, raw nuts, avocado, flax seeds, butter, ghee, cheese. Um, Pumpkin seeds, sunflower oil, obviously chia seed. You've also got your animal-based fats as well that we need to consider as well. Um, so calories, obviously, most people are very fixed on calories, and it's not the bit that's very looking at it from not a very great angle. So yes, obviously, if you overconsume too much of the wrong foods and you're eating really high calorie laden foods, then obviously that's not going to be good. But if we're eating the right types of foods, then calories don't need to be a massive issue so long as we're eating the right types of food, because generally we'll feel more full, more controlled, more satisfied from eating those foods. Our energy will be better sustained, so we don't have to worry too much about counting calories, as say, on that type of eating. We're all different. Yeah, so we've got an ectomorph, a mesomorph, endomorph, and we have to have that understanding of what body type we are. So someone that's tall and skinny and lanky and naturally lean can probably tolerate more in the way of carbs, and we all know that person that we get a little bit jealous of because they seem to be able to eat what they want and they don't put anything on. Then you've got the mesomorph, naturally muscular and athletic, got that V shape. Again, we tend to get a little bit jealous of that person. Endomorph, so this person can't tolerate much in the way of carbohydrate, might need a much lower tolerance level of a certainly high GI carbohydrates. So just have a think about that and what body type you are, what body type your friends might be, and why you can't eat the same way that they do. Um, yeah, so we have talked about most of that. So now putting it all together, let me just see if I have. No, okay. What we'll do in your nutrition packs, we have got the elimination list. Okay, so this is what phase one is built on. So when anyone starts out on our program, they should start off in phase one, and that should last at least a month. Then they should progress into phase two, which should last again 4 to 6 weeks. And then they should progress into phase three, which lasts 8 to 12 weeks. But then they should go right back to phase one again. But most people don't. They sort of finish phase three and then they're pretty happy with their results. And then they start eating their old ways again and they start doing things that they hadn't been doing. And then all of a sudden everything's out of control and they feel like nothing's working for them. So try to think about these three phases as a circle and you just repeat them over and over again. And the reason it's realistic is because in phase one, it's really strict. but this is to reset the body. This is to give the body that nourishment that it needs. This is to really get things going. So in phase one, there's an optional 1 to 3 day juice cleanse. And again, the details of that are in the nutrition plan. So feel free to have a look through that. And if you've got any questions, you don't have to do it. And it's not for everyone. For some people, they don't feel that great off it. If you need more information on that, you can speak to me and I can talk to you about whether it might be a good option or not. Um, then what you're going to do is eliminate the 6 main offenders for at least a month. So strictly no alcohol. And the reason we say no alcohol is because it's a toxic substance. It can really play havoc with your results, for starters, with your blood sugars and fat storage, but can also play havoc with your digestive system as well, and really mess you up there and make it really difficult for you to absorb a lot of the nutrients and get the most out of this plan. Strictly no caffeine, again, because it's a stimulant. Oftentimes we're reliant on it for the wrong reasons. Strictly no cow's dairy. The reason why is because, well, there's a few reasons there, but as well, cow's dairy, the quality of it is extremely low. We want to try and get as best good quality food as much as possible. And some people are intolerant to it as well, so I recommend cutting it out. See if you feel any improvement from taking it out, because most people are over consuming that way too much. There's all loads of other alternatives: almond milk, rice milk, soy milk. With soy, again, you have to be a little bit careful because a lot of it's genetically modified, but as I say, there are alternatives. Strictly no sugar, so that's in the form of concentrated sugar, fast releasing, high GI sugars. We're trying to cut right back on them, even a lot of the certain fruits. And just because something's natural doesn't also mean that it's right for you. So having breakfast and having porridge with honey in it might not necessarily suit you, because you've got carbohydrate with carbohydrate. And that's something that actually, what might be worth me just quickly mentioning now, is that a lot of people do, um, out of all of their meals, breakfast is usually the one meal that is totally out of balance. So remember we said about having that 40-40, 15-20 split in terms of carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Most people's breakfast, because it's toast with jam, or because it's cereal or cornflakes or Weetabix, whatever it is like 90% carbohydrate based and very small percent of good healthy fat and good protein. So what we would need to try and do is really cut back on, or get that balance right there, yeah. And just because something says it's natural, it might still not be right for you. So keep monitoring your foods and keep monitoring how you're feeling, and feed that back to me. Bring in your food diary in once a week, and we can look over it and we can see how you're going. Strictly no processed foods for obvious reasons, with trans fats, hidden sugars, and God knows what else is in there. No wheat. So 9 times out of 10, most people report a really positive effect from cutting out wheat and gluten. So I would recommend that you cut it out. So no bread, no pasta. Rice is okay, but wholemeal versions, cutting those things out, and it really does make a big difference. Most people really do notice it. Massively helps them with their weight loss and with their level of bloating as well. And try to ensure that you eat as much raw, natural, wholesome food as possible. Okay, so lots of salads, stir fries, those sorts of things. Have a look through the recipes in the nutrition pack and see if you can get some ideas from there. If you're struggling, as I say, let me know and I can give you some further help. In phase two, we get a little bit more lenient. So what we're saying is it's 90-10. So 90% of the time you're following the plan, and then 10% of the time you can cheat. So that means 3 out of 35 weekly meal snacks, you can have a bit of a treat. Treats and that still need to be measured. So what I don't want you to think is, right, I can have a cheat meal tonight and that can turn into having a curry with a bottle of wine, with the chocolate ice cream, with the naan bread, with the white rice. That really would be a major overload. You can't save up your points and then just have a massive blowout all in one go, because it can literally undo all of your hard work. So have, maybe a curry with maybe a 1 or 2 glasses of wine, but just be sensible with it, and we'll measure your results, we'll track your results, and we'll um, monitor your food diaries, and then we can tweak it based on how it's working for you. And you can see the further breakdown there. And then phase three is a little bit more, so it's 80-20 split there in terms of how it breaks down. So that's pretty much covered most of the nutrition there, what I really wanted to go over with you. So hopefully, as I say, that's made sense. And as I say, you've got your packs to refer back to. As I say, this is just the foundations. We're going to cover nutrition in much more detail over the next few weeks and that. But if you can really start getting to work on that side of it, it would really be good. Um, just to briefly sort of mention this, obviously lifestyle factors play a massive hand as well with this. So just to quickly mention, sleep is really important. Make sure we're getting enough sleep each night. Stress management, again, that can massive impact on your body transformation results, and creating a support system. As I say, recognizing what's working in your life, what isn't, and as I say, if you need more help with that, we will cover lifestyle in more detail on one of the next webinars. Okay, if you need any further help, reach out to me. Hope that's been helpful, and I'll see you all soon.